The Egyptian president discusses attracting investment while ensuring energy efficiency with officials. Egypt welcomes the joint statement condemning Israeli actions that block humanitarian aid to civilians. And the Iranian foreign minister states that Tehran will not abandon its uranium enrichment program. Welcome back. The news in full with me, Hala Al-Hamalawi. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has met with Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli and Petroleum Minister Karim Badawi to review the ministry's current priorities. The meeting included discussing boosting production and exploration, maximizing value from refining and petrochemicals, advancing mining, and enhancing regional cooperation to attract investments while ensuring energy efficiency and emission reductions. The meeting highlighted efforts to secure petroleum supplies, increase local oil and gas output, and expand exploration activities. Infrastructure upgrades such as floating gas regasification units were also discussed to ensure supply continuity. Collaboration with Cyprus to diversify gas sources and initiatives to develop mining into a dynamic economic sector were also reviewed. President Sisi emphasized fostering an investment-friendly environment to support growth and reduce import costs. Egypt has welcomed the joint statement by foreign ministers of more than 20 countries calling for an end to Israel's war on Gaza and condemning Israeli actions that block humanitarian aid to civilians. In a statement by the Foreign Ministry, Egypt fully supports the rejection of relocating Palestinians to a so-called humanitarian city, viewing forced displacement as a grave violation of international law. The statement's denunciation of Israel settlement expansion and settler violence in the West Bank was also praised. Egypt reaffirmed its ongoing efforts alongside Qatar and the U.S. to broker a Gaza ceasefire and urged the international community to adopt practical steps towards a two-state solution based on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as the capital. Palestinians have gathered at the site of an Israeli tank shelling in western Gaza City that struck a tent housing displaced families. Local health officials reported that the attack killed at least 12 people and wounded dozens. Tanks near a Shati camp fired 2 shells at the tents. The Israeli occupation military has not commented yet. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has expressed deep concern over the rapidly deteriorating humanitarian situation in Gaza, where vital lifelines sustaining the population are collapsing. His spokesperson, Stefan Dujarric, highlighted alarming reports of widespread malnutrition affecting both children and adults. Guterres emphasized Israel's responsibility to fully enable and facilitate humanitarian aid efforts by the UN and other organizations using all the available means. The worsening crisis demands urgent action to prevent further suffering and loss of life. Meanwhile, the UN has warned of a worsening humanitarian crisis in Gaza, with a surge in malnutrition children admitted to Rantisi Children's Hospital amid severe shortages of food and medical supplies. Malnutrition among mothers exacerbates child health, causing infections and deaths. Despite Israel lifting an 11-week blockade, aid deliveries remain limited. UNRWA is banned from entering. UNICEF reported over 5,800 malnutritioned children last month, marking a fourth consecutive increase. Families scavenge for food as community kitchens run dry, highlighting dire conditions. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot has urged Israel to allow foreign journalists into besieged Gaza amid growing famine warnings after 21 months of conflict. Speaking from eastern Ukraine, Barrot called for free and independent press access to document Gaza's dire situation. He criticized the Hanzala aid ship heading to Gaza as irresponsible, saying that it does not help resolve the humanitarian crisis. That comes as the UN warned Gaza's lifelines are near collapse, with over 800 Palestinians killed seeking aid. Barrot's appeal underscores urgent international concern over Gaza's worsening humanitarian disaster. And for more analysis, we now move to Rana Al-Assas in our newsroom. To you, Rana.
Thank you so much, Hera. And for further analysis, we have the pleasure to be joined from Cairo by the International Relations Specialist, Dr. Mohammed Osman. Welcome to Qnews, sir. Sir, what is the diplomatic significance of more than 20 foreign ministers jointly condemning Israel's war on Gaza? And how does this joint statement influence international efforts to push for a ceasefire?
Thank you for having me, Rana. It seems that there is a very strong and growing discontent with Israel's criminal policies in Gaza. Israel has been applying genocidal means to in conducting its war on Gaza over the past 18 months, and it seems that the international community has had enough and is unable to cope with Israel's activities anymore. It's embarrassing. Many of those 25 countries, before their own public opinions and before even their own allies beyond the Western world. As you know, most of those 25 countries are Western countries, as you can see. However, unfortunately, these countries have not been able to muster the efforts to apply enough pressure on the Israelis in order to compel them to stop this war. Unfortunately, the Israelis have been going on a killing rampage over the past year and a half or even more. And the Europeans have done basically nothing to stop them. Yes, a couple of countries froze some arms shipments. The only country that is being very vocal about severing relations with Israel and partnerships and applying sanctions is Spain. However, as we can see, countries like Britain and France are very reluctant to implement actual sanctions on Israel, even though they have hinted several times that they might take certain punitive measures against Israel. They have not done anything so far. Even yesterday, Britain announced that it will donate 20 million sterling pounds to the reconstruction of Gaza, which is a laughable figure, given that the reconstruction of Gaza will cost around $50 billion. So unfortunately, the international community is not serious about applying actual pressure on the Israelis. Just like the Egyptian foreign minister said, the Palestinians in Gaza have been left on their own.
Sir, what are the legal implications of forced displacement plans like the so-called humanitarian city under international law?
It seems that Israel is planning to construct in southern Gaza, in the Palestinian city of Rafah, the largest concentration camp since Auschwitz, the Nazi concentration camp in Poland during World War II. It seems that the Israelis are following in the footsteps of Nazi Germany and will construct the largest concentration camp. Why am I calling it a concentration camp? Because it is designed to detain over 700,000 Palestinians, meaning that those Palestinians will be incarcerated in this so-called humanitarian city and will not be allowed to leave. They will only be allowed to leave to third countries to be displaced. So it's a mechanism of forced displacement and ethnic cleansing in the Gaza Strip. And if it is implemented, of course, with US support, unfortunately, that means that the United States will be in direct collusion with the Israelis in their ethnic cleansing schemes. It is nothing short of an integral part of its genocidal policy in Gaza. The latest reports say that the population of Gaza has decreased by about 10 to 15%. The people who have left, about at least 60,000 people have died. Those are the documented deaths. If we add the missing and the people who died indirectly due to causes that are not directly related to hostilities, then the number might jump to over 150,000. We are speaking about the mass extermination of a significant part of the Palestinian populace so that the rest of them can be involuntarily displaced out of Palestine under the guise or under the cover, the false cover, of course, of the so-called voluntary departure. The humanitarian city is a means by which they plan to apply this very vile plan.
How significant is Egypt's endorsement of the joint foreign minister's statement in shaping international pressure on Israel, sir?
I think Egypt is basically in line with its historical commitment and its historical stance on the Palestinian cause, and particularly on the war in Gaza. Egypt is encouraging all countries to take more proactive measures to end the war on Gaza. Egypt has lobbied for European support, for African support, for Chinese support, for Russian support over the past year and a half, for its humanitarian initiatives and for its political initiatives as well, for the reaching a ceasefire and the settlement and reaching a permanent settlement of the conflict in Gaza. And Egypt has been, Egypt also is playing a major role in mustering support and funding for the upcoming reconstruction conference on Gaza, which is supposed to be held once a ceasefire enters into effect in Gaza. However, that remains, of course, elusive, the idea of a ceasefire, because the Israelis are weaseling their way around to avoid any commitment to a long truce so far. We should have had a ceasefire about a few weeks ago. Now they are saying that we won't have a ceasefire before at least 2 weeks, while the Israelis on the ground are realizing their goals of emptying the Gaza Strip, large chunks of the Gaza Strip of the population. They occupy about 65% of Gaza now, and the 65% they occupy have been depopulated. The people have been moved to less than 40% of the original territory in Gaza, of Gaza, bearing in mind that Gaza, before the war even, was an extremely overpopulated land strip. It's an enclave that hosts about 2 million people, while it's barely the size of one of Cairo's large neighborhoods. So as you can see, that the Israelis are realizing these genocidal conditions on the ground, and Egypt is racing with time in order to muster international support to put a stop to Israel's criminal behavior.
Sir, with growing malnutrition and aid blockage, what particular steps can the international community take to enforce humanitarian access into Gaza?
The international community needs to pressure Israel and even the United States to restore the established, internationally recognized mechanism of aid redistribution under the auspices of various UN specialized agencies, namely, of course, UNRWA, which Israel has decided to treat as a terrorist organization, unfortunately, and the United States is waging a war on it in order to defund it permanently. So these internationally acclaimed humanitarian organizations and UN organizations need to return and oversee the aid, the distribution of humanitarian aid in the Gaza Strip. What we are witnessing right now is that their role has been overtaken by the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is a U.S. supported, backed and Israeli-backed NGO that, of course, with a very shady background. They are taking part in the forced starvation of the Palestinian people. Before this organization took over the distribution of humanitarian aid, there used to be 400 distribution points all over Gaza. Now, under this organization, there are only 3, and Israel is applying a huge blockade on Gaza. In Egypt, here, thousands of trucks are lining up on the border that UNRWA said are enough to feed Gaza for the next 3 months, yet the Israelis would not let them in and are resorting, along with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and the United States, to their own maimed and distorted version of so-called humanitarian delivery, which is basically causing the mass killings of Palestinians. Many Palestinians cannot access these areas, and many are dying of starvation now. And those who attempt to gain access to these humanitarian distribution points to receive aid, sometimes are shot. Over 1,000 people died while attempting to receive humanitarian aid from this organization. So the international community needs to apply strong pressure to restore the established.
Hopefully, Dr. Mohammed Osman, the international community puts more pressure on what's happening in Israel. Dr. Mohammed Osman, International Relations Specialist, thank you very much for joining us on Q News and for your fantastic analysis. Now we go back to Hela Al-Hamalawi in our studios. Hela.
Thank you so much, Rana. Moving on to Tehran, where Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has stated that despite severe damage to its nuclear facilities during recent Israel-US strikes, Tehran will not abandon its uranium enrichment program. He emphasized that enrichment is a scientific achievement and a matter of national pride. While enrichment activities are currently halted due to damage, Iran insists on retaining the right to enrich uranium. Araghchi also noted openness to indirect talks with Washington, but rejected proposals for shared enrichment with Gulf states, underscoring Iran's commitment to its nuclear program.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين.
وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
Lebanese President Joseph Aoun has affirmed ongoing communications to address regional developments and prevent their impact on Lebanon. During a meeting with the evangelical community leader in Syria and Lebanon, Pastor Joseph Kassab, Aoun stressed the current sensitive phase demands national awareness and unified stances to preserve Lebanon's unity, sovereignty, and independence. He recalled Lebanon's resilience through tougher times achieved by rallying around constitutional and security institutions. Aoun also praised Lebanese political and spiritual leaders' responses to recent unfortunate events in Syria. Pastor Kassab expressed hope that Lebanon will overcome its current challenges and commended Aoun's active diplomatic efforts in this regard. U.S. Special Envoy for Syria Thomas Barak has held talks in Beirut with Lebanon's parliamentary speaker Nabih Berri in a visit focused on security and regional ties. This marks Barak's third visit to Lebanon in just over a month. The U.S. envoy, who also serves as ambassador to Turkey, is promoting a roadmap that includes disarming non-state armed groups, pushing long-delayed economic reforms, and improving Lebanon's relations with Syria. The visit comes amid heightened political and financial pressures on the Lebanese government. Moving on to West Africa, where Egypt's Foreign Minister Badr Abdel-Ati and Nigerian Foreign Minister Yusuf Tugar have witnessed the signing of a memorandum of understanding between Nigeria's Dar al-Halal Group Limited and Egypt's Future of Egypt Sustainable Development Agency at the Nigerian Foreign Ministry in Abuja. The agreement aims to strengthen cooperation in managing agricultural facilities and projects, infrastructure development, including roads, modern irrigation systems, and agricultural mechanization. It also promotes the exchange of technical expertise, fostering deeper bilateral collaboration to enhance sustainable development efforts in both countries. The Syrian Fact-Finding Committee on the Coastal Events has held a press conference revealing their investigation outcomes. The delay in announcing results was due to the severity of sudden incidents. The committee submitted its report to the President on time after reviewing 23 official briefings and collecting 930 witness testimonies. They documented over 480 cases of homes and shops burned, visited 33 sites including violation locations and cemeteries, and recorded 1,426 deaths, including more than 230 security personnel. The committee identified 265 suspected former regime members involved, recommended governance reforms for security forces, urged prosecution of fugitives, and called for measures to prevent sectarian incitement. The investigation phase is now complete. Hundreds of Bedouin civilians were evacuated from Syria's Druze majority city of Suwayda under a U.S.-brokered truce after days of deadly sectarian violence that killed hundreds and displaced thousands. Families, including women and children, were relocated to a school in Daraa, with more evacuations planned if calm persists. Syrian President Ahmad al-Shara blamed outlaw groups for the bloodshed and pledged to protect Druze rights and ensure accountability. Soldiers and emergency teams have inspected the aftermath of a Bangladesh Air Force jet crash at a Dhaka school campus. The F-7 BGI aircraft crashed shortly after takeoff during a routine training mission, killing more than 30 people, including the pilot, and injuring more than 80, mostly children. Authorities cited mechanical failure as the cause and launched an investigation. The injured were hospitalized with rescue efforts ongoing amid wreckage and fires. This strategy follows a recent deadly Air India crash in India, marking one of the worst aviation disasters in a decade, highlighting regional aviation safety concerns. Egypt has expressed heartfelt condolences to Bangladesh over the tragic crash of a Bangladeshi Air Force training plane that struck a school in Dhaka, killing more than 30 people, mostly students. In a statement, the Egyptian Foreign Ministry conveyed solidarity with the Bangladeshi people, offering sincere sympathies to the victims' families and wishing a swift recovery for the injured. This comes as rescue teams worked tirelessly to save survivors amid the wreckage and fires, with many critically wounded. Egypt stands with Bangladesh in this difficult time, mourning the loss and supporting efforts to aid those affected by this devastating accident. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has announced that the next round of peace talks with Russia is scheduled for July the 23rd in Turkey. Quoting the head of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council, Zelensky also mentioned ongoing preparations for a detainee exchange. Rustem Amirov, who is now the Secretary of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council, headed the first two rounds of talks with Russia. He confirmed the meeting plans during Zelensky's nightly address, promising further details soon. The Kremlin has stated that no miracles should be expected from a proposed third round of direct peace talks between Russia and Ukraine, offering no timeline for a potential conflict-ending agreement. This comes as Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky announced Kyiv's proposal for talks in Turkey this week, aiming to accelerate ceasefire negotiations. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov expressed skepticism about breakthroughs, emphasizing Russia's commitment to its goals. He declined to provide any time frame for a peace deal, noting significant work remains before high-level meetings can occur. Zelensky continues to seek a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin to advance negotiations. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has announced that Germany is negotiating with the U.S. for replacement Patriot missile systems as existing units are set to be transferred to Ukraine. While the U.S. has generally agreed to supply new Patriots to Germany and the EU, these replacements have not yet been secured. Merz emphasized that Germany will deliver its systems to Ukraine once replacements are confirmed. The Norwegian Prime Minister stated that his country is prepared to share the costs once the procurement is finalized. The U.S. Army has released footage of live grenades being dropped from a drone during a training exercise in Germany, marking the first for conventional forces. The video, filmed at a training area in late June, shows soldiers attaching grenades to unmanned drones and conducting test flights. The Army says that it's the first time its conventional units have used a drone to drop live grenades. The device uses an audible dropper that pulls the pin mid-flight before releasing the grenade over a target. The United States is withdrawing from UNESCO as President Donald Trump moves to pull back from key international institutions, echoing steps taken during his first term. 2 European diplomats confirmed the U.S. decision to leave the Paris-based agency, which promotes global cooperation in education, science, and culture. The move follows Trump's wider review of U.S. involvement in UN bodies, which has already seen Washington withdraw from the WHO and freeze funding to UNRWA. Former U.S. President Joe Biden has previously rejoined these institutions, but Trump is once again reversing course, with a final review due by August. And that brings us to the end of our news bulletin, and here is what we have been covering. The Egyptian president discusses attracting investments while ensuring energy efficiency with officials. Egypt welcomes the joint statement condemning Israeli actions that block humanitarian aid to civilians. And the Iranian foreign minister states that Tehran will not abandon its uranium enrichment program. And this concludes our news bulletin for the hour. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Qnews EG to stay informed. My name is Hala Al-Hamalawi. I thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.